You there, old boy?
I'm here.
Excellent. All right, guys, I was just saying there at the beginning before you joined, Rush, my main goal here is to get through this in a concise way. I'm more than happy to talk to people at length about this topic one-to-one if anyone wants to chat to me. I know some of you guys are keen to start doing these at SIX3NINE. This is a real quick overview of the kind of system I have for delivering the nutrition consultations with clients the first time I'm meeting them, and how I take them through those steps. There's a decent amount of content here, but I'm going to try and get through it in a nice, timely fashion, so we've got some time for chats at the end. So it's kind of a three-step process. Hopefully you can all see the screen. I've got educate, identify, and action. It's the kind of catchy three-word phrase I'm using here for how these things work. So I'm going to just talk you through those and what they look like. So, there we go. So educate is the first one. This is when the client first comes in and you're meeting them for the first time. You're obviously having your conversation, going through the normal pleasantries. But the three things you need to do in this initial phase here is assess what the start point of the client is, determine what their goal is, and then outline to them what is going to be required in a broader sense to actually achieve that. Okay, so we want some real clarity at the start. So I've got a tape measure and a scales there. At SIX3NINE, we've got the body scanner machine, which gives you a bit of a printout reading. Just as standard, unless someone's against it, tend to get people on the machine just so we can have a brief overview of what's going on. From there, in your general conversation, you're going to get an idea of what the goal is from the client. They're going to tell you, okay, in the example today, I'm using weight loss, right? But say it's weight loss, weight gain, whatever it is, you get an idea. Because you've already done that assessment, so whether it's weighing the person, maybe taking a body scanner, or if you're into using calipers or measure tape, whatever it is, you've also got some data on where that start point is. So often, I'm sure you guys have experienced this when someone comes in and they're like, I really want to lose weight. And you're kind of looking at either a body comp reading or even just a scale and being like, weight loss doesn't seem like the right goal here. Now, if you've got some, because they're already too underweight or something like that. So if you've got that data to show them where you can sort of say, look, body fat's already quite low. It's more that maybe muscle mass is a little bit low. So you might be able to encourage them round to a different approach. Maybe they want to maintain weight, but increase muscle, lose fat, whatever it is. So it's important to assess where their start point is and hear from them what their goal is. So once that's out of the way, you have to have this little education bit where you're outlining what is required. Now, this is normally most pertinent to changes in body weight. If I'm sitting across from someone who wants to gain weight and they're telling me about how healthy they're eating loads of protein, I'm like, okay, but you need to understand that you need to eat more food if you want to gain weight. Okay, if you're currently doing all of this training and loads of cardio and stuff, and even if you're eating lots of protein, you're not going to gain weight unless you're eating enough calories. More commonly, it's the other way around. I try and explain in this setting here briefly that in order for someone to lose weight, what I need is them to be consuming less calories in their diet than they're burning through activity and exercise. This is rarely going to be a completely foreign concept to someone. Someone normally will have an idea of this already. They will often have some mythology or some other ideas going on about different things they need to maybe be doing. This is a reasonable time to have a little bit of a conversation that's going to get them on board with you. And the best way I try and do that is use an anecdote from their own life to help convince them of this situation. Okay, so the way that works in practice is when you're meeting someone who's overweight or looking to lose weight and you ask them a little bit about their history. So have you always been overweight? Was there a period of time where you gained weight or when you've lost weight? And normally you get some backstory about weight going up, weight going down. And you can ask a little bit about those times in their life. So if someone was like, oh yeah, I went to uni and that's when I gained a load of weight. We can be like, okay, well, what was happening at uni? Oh, well, I started having loads of alcohol all the time. I used to play sport at school, then I stopped playing sport. So what you can kind of do is outline to that person, okay, so what we saw is you went to uni, calorie intake really went up because you're having all that alcohol, and activity level came down because you weren't doing your exercise anymore. So, oh, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I had success a few months later when I went on this like keto diet my trainer put me on, where I basically had no carbs and all that stuff, and we did loads of training. I lost some weight. So, okay, why did that work? Well, when you do a keto diet, you massively reduce carbohydrates, so you're bringing your calorie intake really far down. You did loads of training, so your activity level's gone up. Yeah, so you can kind of bring that around to explaining to them some of the success or failures that they've had in the past, how that ties into the model you're describing to them. What's cool at that point is, though, you can say to them, we don't need to do these extreme things, these different diets that are going to be really, really difficult. All I need to do now is go through what you're currently doing with your food and your activity and figure out some kind of way that I can pull down those calories just enough, or maybe increase calorie expenditure so as we get the result we want. Doesn't have to be more specific than that. It just has to be me looking at what you're doing and figuring out where the biggest windows of opportunity are. All right. So at that point, it should be quite nice because it feels like they're going to get a very bespoke approach, and also they're somewhat on board with what's going on. Identify. So we're going to spend a bit more time on this one because this is now the main bulk of this presentation and what you're doing. Because your job here, once your client is kind of happy that they know what you're trying to do, you have to try and identify where the barriers are and how you're going to go about bringing about change. So there's 3 points to identify. The first one is the food recall. Second one's alcohol in restaurants, so talking about the frequency of those kind of things. And then the third one is just putting that together and you trying to find where those big windows of opportunity are. So the food recall is the first thing I do, which is after we've kind of had that general chat at the beginning, I'd normally say to my client, okay, so look, just give me a typical overview of what your normal day of food might look like. Don't worry about the weekend for now. Let's just talk about a typical day at work. So here we go. This is what the food recall looks like. I prefer these to people doing the stuff where people do the 7-day food diary, then bring it into you. Because I think I've chatted to some of you guys before about this. Often that's open to people sort of having a perfect week and then presenting that to you because they know they're being monitored. When you do a food recall with someone, you're just asking them, what do you tend to have for breakfast? And you're writing it down. So it gives an opportunity for them to be like, you see how in the afternoon there, I've done snack or pastry, sometimes nothing. Because someone might say to you, oh, when I'm good, I don't have anything, but sometimes I have a pastry. So it gives you a more realistic representation of kind of good and bad case scenarios. So you get more of a full picture. So all I'm doing here is just writing down what they're saying. Nice and easy, not putting any judgment or any kind of interventions at this stage, just noting down exactly what it is what they're saying. Now, in my mind, down the right-hand column there, you can see that I've jotted down these calories. That isn't something you need to necessarily do for the client there and then. But in my mind, what I'm doing is just thinking, okay, how's this kind of stacking up? I know the client's body weight at this point. They've been on the body composition machine. I can make a rough guesstimate of what the person's maintenance calorie intake probably is going to be, okay, based on what they've told me maybe about their activity level, their job, those kind of things. If that's something you're not as confident doing, that will come just with time and maybe spending a bit of time using calorie calculators and plugging in different numbers. But what I can see from looking at that when I run through it in my mind is, okay, it looks like on a typical day, this person's probably eating somewhere between 1,700 to 2,000 calories, somewhere around that figure. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. I've got that information now to kind of to keep for later on. So we've gone through the typical day, no real judgments on that. Then I normally turn the page. Let's talk about the weekend. You know, does it tend to look the same, or are there some things slightly different? And that's when we then move into the alcohol and restaurant stuff. Okay, so if someone isn't eating in restaurants, if someone isn't drinking alcohol, this step's not too relevant. We could skip this one and just say, okay, let's go back and look at that. More often than not, you'll find this. I've just put this slide up. I don't know how well everyone can see it. It's just a real quick breakdown of the calorie content in restaurant food and in alcohol. It's really this side that's more important, kind of looking at, you know, most starters are going to be somewhere between about 300 and 500 calories. Most main dishes are going to be around 1,000, could be slightly more if they want like a pizza or pasta kind of thing. Desserts are around 500 plus, side dishes can be about 200 or so. Glass of wine's around 130 or so calories. So long story short, if someone's eating out in a restaurant and they're having a starter's main and a glass of wine, it's going to be somewhere around 1,500 calories probably for that. Okay, if they're having side dishes, desserts, it's going to be 2,000 plus. Equally, if someone's going out for drinks, you know, glass of wine, again, about 130, so 3 or 4 glasses of wine, you're looking at 400 calories plus, 400, 500 calories. My point here is people may not necessarily be aware of this, but when you're talking to your client, even just a question such as, oh, okay, we've had a look at the typical week. What does the weekend tend to look like? How often do you tend to be in restaurants? If at that point in the consultation, the person says to me, well, yeah, we tend to go out on a Saturday and maybe it's a takeaway on Sunday. More or less at that point in the consultation, I know that really all I'm going to be asking them to focus on is that, okay? Because that is really going to be the biggest window of opportunity for change. So this is a point in time where you can just get a sense of, okay, they've told you that they eat out twice a week or 3 times a week, and you don't need to run through any of this yet. Just worth kind of bearing that in mind at that point. I've kind of got we can go 2 ways on this one. We're going to address the alcohol and stuff in a minute, but let's just start by looking at that original plan they gave us, okay? So let's say with this, you just kind of clocked that, okay, they're eating out 2 times a week or whatever. No need to go into that too much. So once you've done that, you kind of assess that they're eating out a little bit and you've had a look at their typical day. This is when we start to now look for those big windows of opportunity. You've got all the information at this point. You've extracted the information. Cool. So this is the plan they wrote down for you. You've kind of guesstimated it's somewhere in that region, 1,700 to 2,000. And you're thinking again, based on this person's weight and activity level, that maybe 1,500 calories would be a sensible amount of calories for them to lose weight on. Like I say, if you don't feel confident enough doing this at this stage, this is something you could leave until after, when you send notes through, and you could go away and use a calorie calculator. It doesn't have to be done then and there. If you feel confident to talk in these terms there, absolutely fine. So when I'm looking at that plan, I'm thinking, okay, where are the biggest windows of opportunity here? And you can see on that right-hand side, just a couple of really easy things that I'm thinking. So having a cappuccino, easy swap to a coffee. The black coffee would be 3 calories, a white coffee is going to be about 50 or so. Having a Pret sandwich and crisps at lunch, which is 700 all in. If I cut the crisps out, we're down to about 500. And that pastry in the afternoon, if we can swap that to be like a protein snack, protein yogurt, a kind of bar or some Baby Bell lights. You all know that I like various different things like that. Stick that in there. That's a little bit lower calorie, more filling. And then it sounds like they were doing a pretty good job with dinner already. If they weren't, I might think about some things I can suggest to them. So real easy, nothing crazy there. I'm just sort of thinking, okay, there's a few opportunities to change things here. Fine. This is the real thing though. So again, it's not an exaggeration to say that like 90%, so 9 out of 10 people that I see, I'm drawing a graph that looks like this for them. Now this is much neater because I've made it on Excel rather than me drawing it. But they tend to just be hand drawn. And all I'm doing with that is outlining to the person that even if we make these changes, so even if we make that plan down to 1,500 calories, if they continue with the current habits they have with alcohol and restaurant food, this is what's going to happen. So this isn't crazy. This is just someone going out for like a date night on the weekend with their partner, starters, mains, couple of glasses of wine. This is after work drinks on a Friday, which is just a bottle of wine with colleagues. And then here in the week, it might have been a meal out with friends. So it wouldn't be someone who'd be like, oh my God, I get takeaway every night of the week. But what you can see with the level of spikes here is that the average calorie intake line, rather than being down here on the green line, can everyone see my mouse, by the way? Or am I imagining that? Yeah. So rather than being down here on the green line, where it would be if they were eating 1,500 every day, if you add all of this up, divide it across the 7 days, you end up with this line here, which is 2,000 calories, more or less maintenance. So as much as I want to talk to them about maybe the pastry in the week or these different bits and pieces, it's ultimately not going to make a difference if they're still doing those habits. So once I've realized that, I've identified those areas for them, I've shown them that graph. Normally when people are looking at a graph like that, it's very difficult for them to go, oh, but maybe I should be just having brown bread rather than white bread in my sandwich. Because when it's laid out like this and you can see those big spikes, it's pretty obvious what it is. So again, they're kind of on board with you at this stage and it's like, all right, what can I do? How can I make the changes? So that's when we get into the third phase. So at this point, they should be on board. You've identified what the barriers are and you're ready to help them make changes to it. These are the 3 areas that we can make interventions to restaurant, alcohol, food, that kind of stuff. Frequency, quantity, and type. Frequency is the biggest one. It's kind of a no-brainer. Like if you look at that, if you come in and just take one of those whole days out, it's going to make a huge difference to the overall curve of the week, and it's going to bring this average down massively. So, you know, that would be often the first point of call would be go to frequency. I've said there, if someone's eating out, drinking 3 times a week, and you bring that to just 1 night a week, that's going to save 2,000 to 3,000 calories just there. Okay, easy. Problem with frequency though is, again, if we look at this graph, people are seeing their friends, they've got work colleagues, they've got a date night with their partner. It doesn't always feel like the easiest intervention to make if someone's got an active social life. You're just going to go, oh, here's an idea, just stop going out. So that's why we need quantity. We need that for those people that still need to be seeing people regularly doing their social life, but still trying to manage calorie intake. So quantity, really simple set of rules on that one. That would just be when you're in the restaurant, just order the main dish. If possible, don't have the starters, don't have the desserts, okay? I lean a bit into type here with this one as well, because I'm saying, look, swap that glass of wine, which is 130 calories, for a gin slimline tonic, around 50 calories, or a vodka soda lime, 50 calories, vodka diet coke, clear spirit, calorie-free mixer, it's super low. So then you get a meal which is more around 1,000 calories versus 1,500 to 2,000 calories, which is again saving you around 1,000 calories on that meal. Type is just changing the type of alcohol you're having. So beers are around 200 calories a pint, glass of wine's about 130 to 150. Cocktails, things like that are crazy, even more. Whereas, like I say, those drinks I've just described, clear spirit, calorie-free mixer, it's going to be more around 50 calories. So again, 3 glasses of wine, 450, 3 gin and slims is 150. It's a reasonably significant change. So there's our original graph. If we put some of those things into practice, it could end up looking like this. All I've done here is move that dinner to just a main dish with a vodka soda lime. Again, drinks, still having 4 drinks at your after work function, but they're just gin and slimline tonics rather than wines. Date night with partner, going out on a bit more of a limb with this one. Cooking at home together in a romantic setting rather than going to the restaurant. So I always send through people loads of recipes and stuff they can get from the BBC Good Food website or some of my own reference sheets for making meals that are like calorie appropriate for them. So I'll just try and sell the person on, like, you know, if you're only going to go out once a week and you really want to see your friends that week, why not do the date night at home and try and keep on top of it that way. So that's a fairly significant difference just visually. But most importantly, you can see where our red line is now. The average intake across the week is more or less exactly where you want it to be. Okay, so you've done the job there in bringing that down. I've put this slide in again just because really this belongs in the action column as well, which is that you're going to talk through the areas that you're going to actually action in that diet with your client. The reason I put this second here is I hope it makes sense to you guys that if I know that a week looks a bit like this, I really want to drum home to the client that that's where we got to focus. And it's like, these things are important, but don't get lost in the weeds of this. We've got to sort out that habit-based stuff first and put all the stress there. So then I'll often return to this after we've done that section and go, okay, so just to kind of go through with a real fine tooth comb now, the things I want to change in your week are going to be these things. They might not be happy with it. They might say, I want a cappuccino every day. You know, I have a cappuccino. You're not going to make me swap that. So then I might say to them, okay, let's talk about if we can make the cereal or toast a Greek yogurt with some berries, which is going to be more like 150 calories. Do you know what I mean? Could you make changes elsewhere in the diet to accommodate different things? Possibly. So you've got to work with your client on that. So there's your 2 interventions, this one, and then that can be summarized. Keep it simple. I think I spoke to you guys before about this in terms of adherence, which is that the biggest barrier, in my opinion, to adherence is focusing on far too many things at once. But this happens so much with nutrition, where people are trying to focus on everything, all their nutrient quality, what type of fats they're having, what time of day they're eating, fast and slow release carbohydrates, all of this stuff. And they're applying equal willpower to doing all of it. And then when some of it falls off, they think, oh, I've messed up. And then it all goes down the toilet. Whereas if I can go, let's take all of your willpower and just put it on these 4 key areas here, just that's all I want you to think about, then the chances of them actually doing it are much higher. So when I write my notes through to our clients, I would summarize it quite clearly at the top like this, which is, we decided in our consultation together that restaurant visits are now going to be no more than once a week. When you're in the restaurant, it's going to be a main 1 drink only. They were our rules, we decided. We're going to lose the crisp at lunch, just have a sandwich, or I could send over some other options of sensible things for lunch. And then in the afternoon, we're going to swap the pastry out for one of these many protein snacks I'm going to send you as an option. That's it. Yeah, that's all I want you to think about. Okay. How's everyone doing so far with this? We good? Cool. Well, that was record time, everyone. I've flown through it. I've left enough time for some questions. So what I will say is, obviously me doing that there was a case study, more or less. So it was running through one particular individual and I was able to talk about those different goals. So of course, not everyone's day is going to look like that. Not everyone's week is going to look like that. So the changes you'd have to make for those things are all going to be different, obviously. But how does that sound as a general sort of approach for delivering a consultation, guys?
Yeah, it's very solid, mate. I just like the way that you you go through the journey, because I know myself, when I've been unsuccessful with clients, I think it's because there's a certain assumed level of knowledge, and that I kind of jump ahead to things like calorie targets and macronutrients without actually first laying that groundwork in to say, look, this is the picture that I'm seeing. And I think it's just not communicating that effectively to the client, and clients kind of like, all right, calories and macros, what am I doing? Why am I doing that? You know, there's I think you mentioned that buy-in. It's not quite as good unless you do that a bit at the beginning. So I think it's the structure of it that's really nice.
100%. You know, we've got to bear in mind that when people come to us for personal training, we might be the first personal trainer they've ever had. We might not be. And equally, we're probably not the first thing they've ever tried to lose weight or get fitter. They've probably tried other things. So their kind of trust in all of it may not be 100%, because they've probably tried things, been told things, read things, tried to implement it and not seen success with it. So it's really important to have that initial conversation with the person, where what you're trying to do is like make them feel comfortable that you understand their situation. If you can explain to them why changes have happened in their body weight previously. If you can identify, oh, you got a new job and you moved there. Oh, did you stop seeing your friends, so you weren't going out as much with your friends? And it's like, oh yeah, I wasn't actually going out as much. Oh yeah, and I did start walking to work rather than commuting. Oh, that's probably why I lost. Do you see what I mean? So you can almost, if you can demonstrate that you understand why things happened in their life to them previously that they didn't understand at that point, that's a pretty good way of buying in to believe you may be able to predict what's going to happen if they listen to you now. So that's the first thing, is getting the trust with it, and just being careful with your kind of bedside manner to not come across in a way which is condescending or patronizing or accusatory. I think that's something we've all found difficult, is often when you're talking to a weight loss client about losing weight, this idea of, oh, you know, you need to eat less calories than you burn or whatever. You'll often meet that resistance. Oh, no, I barely eat anything. You know, I don't eat anything. And it can be a real tough point, because then you're like, well, am I going to say you're a liar? Am I going to do this, do that? And I've found, just because 9 times out of 10, it's either that people are having lots of alcohol, restaurant food, or possibly snacking lots. There's not many people who are going home having huge dinners and having huge lunches and saying to you, I don't eat a lot. I think people's cognitive dissonance isn't quite there. But what it is very possible for them to do is have salads for lunch, salads for dinner, and be a little bit less aware of, well, I had a cake and coffee for lunch, but I didn't know that added up to 800 calories. Or, well, I went to Pizza Express and got a salad at the weekend, but actually I didn't know that was 900 calories, and the 2 cocktails I had were another 5. Do you see what I mean? So where I try and go when someone's telling me they don't eat a lot is I actually agree with them. And I would say, no, I completely agree. And actually, let's go through your typical day now. And as we work through it, and it turns out of being 1,400, 1,500 calories, I can accept that that's probably true most of the time. So I'll write it up, and then that's when it's like, okay, that's great. Or how does the weekend look? Is it the same? And they might be like, well, actually, no, at the weekend I do this, do that. And what we slowly uncover then are those areas. So it's kind of like, I'm not saying you're a liar, you don't eat little. It's like, you actually do, you eat very little. I might even say to the person, potentially because you're so restrictive in the week, it's maybe why we end up having those extra cakes or things at the weekend. But it's trying to always make them right to an extent and go with them on the journey, and then say, but actually this is what's happening as a result. Yeah. That's how I found it to be most successful, because I've had some real tricky clients with this, and trying not to end up where you're here and there is difficult. But maybe just the last thing I found that, Russ, I think it's a really good one, a really good point, is when you initially set up this idea of energy balance to them, I think it can be a way I've found really successfully of explaining that to someone is I talk about this reverse engineering of energy balance, which is to say, what's happening with your weight currently? It's like, well, I've been the same weight for like 6 months. It's like, okay, cool. So what we know by that, what we know is that at present, your calorie expenditure and your calorie intake are about the same. And the reason we know that is, I know you're not eating, 3,000 calories a day, because if you were, you'd be gaining weight, because that's where your calorie intake would be. And they'd be going, oh, yeah, no, of course, and obviously. And they'll agree with you on that one, no problem, because they're not eating 3,000 calories a day. We know you're not doing that, or else you'd be gaining weight, but you're maintaining weight. So then it's much easier to go. And equally, therefore, we know that you can't be eating significantly less than what the maintenance calorie intake is, because we'd also then see that weight was coming down. Do you see what I mean? So you give them both. You give them, they will accept one, which means they kind of then have to accept the other, which is that you agree with each other that we're at maintenance. And that's right at the start. Then all we're going to do is together is go and find where the problem is. And what's so nice about that is you're literally on their side then, going into their food diary together, trying to work together to find it. And you've already kind of accepted that it's going to be there somewhere. And what's nice about that is I sometimes even said to people when they look a bit like they're maybe going to lie to me in the nicest way, is I would say things like, in a way, actually, the worse, quote unquote, that this is now, the better. Because the more areas I can find here that are easy wins for me to change, the actually easier it's going to be. If I hear something here which is not non-representative, I'm going to be scratching my head to find where can I bring calories out, and it's going to almost give you a worse diet. The more brutally honest it is, the easier it's going to be for us to find those windows. Any questions? Yes, Russell.
Your approach is quite a I guess I know you mentioned you could leave the numbers out, not necessarily show them to the client, but it is almost it's a mathematical equation, isn't it? And trying to have a look at the maths of the situation. I don't know if you've come across anyone in the actual consultations or whether this crowd is slightly different to people who are actually seeking nutritional help, but there is this kind of, fairly reasonably sized movement away from this idea of counting calories because of diet culture and things like that. Have you come across any resistance to that kind of approach within the consultations, or is it just something that at the moment is, not part of that crowd? Sorry to spring that one on you.
Absolutely. I've come across it all, Russ. I'll say as a and certainly, absolutely. But what's nice is this model that I use here, and I'll try and get an examples. And Rachel, I'm not sure if you've ever seen an example of the kind of notes I send out to people. I'll see if I can get one for you, because I think everyone else here probably has. But what's nice about it, Russ, is I can kind of spin this both ways. In that it seems very mathematical, especially when I've got those numbers on the screen for you there. But normally when I talk to someone in that first chat about what's going on in their life and all of that, if that person says to me, oh, I did all this MyFitnessPal tracking and I hate the whole calories, I want to move away from calories. I'm like, perfect, completely agree, because what we're going to do here, you're not going to be doing any tracking or anything like that. Like, I don't really believe in, literally calorie counting on apps and things. I'm not a big advocate for it. I don't think the accuracy is there really in both people and the technology. So I say all we're going to do is look at what you're currently doing, and I'm going to find some windows of opportunity just for some easy changes you can make that's going to bring about what we need without having to count calories. Because people aren't normally so stubborn with it, they won't accept that energy balance exists as a concept, but they're normally actually more wrong in my mind, which is that we don't necessarily need to be counting. I have an expression which is the body counts calories whether we do or not, which is sometimes something worth mentioning. But if someone was anti-calorie counting, this system is perfect for them, because all they're going to get in their notes is breakfast. Here's a list of things I recommend you having. Lunch, here's a list of things I recommend you having from the places you like, Pret, Itsu, Leon, these different places. Dinner, here's a load of recipes from the BBC Good Food website. Here's a reference sheet I've made so you can make a load of meals that are appropriate. I know all those meals will be 500 calories because I've made the reference sheet. I know the recipes they're going to eat are 500 calories because I've picked the recipes. And I know what they're having for lunch from Itsu is 500 calories because I've picked it. I know their snacks, 220 grams of protein. So I'm in charge of that. And if I send it to them and just say, as long as your day looks loosely like this, you're going to be in line where I need you to be for your goal without having to count calories. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Whereas other people who are like staunch MyFitnessPalers, you almost have to pull them a bit back in line and say, there's still calorie counting behind this, by the way. And then I'll put next to your dinner, it's 500 calories. You can have what you want and track it, or here's a load of suggestions that do it for you. So it literally sits here and it can pull people in from either side. So that's about the way you sell it. That's about the way you communicate it. And that's why reading someone immediately as they come in that first conversation is very important, if you want to make sure you're going to speak the same language as them, or else it starts off on a bad note. Okay, 5 minutes left.
Question.
Yes, Keza.
How long did it take you to have this kind of structure, and was it just like trial and error? How did you go about this?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Kez. Well, look, I did this presentation a year ago, so I've been doing it more or less the same way for the last year. And I 100%. I did my first nutrition consultation, and I guess that was built off a bit of a blueprint of what I'd done with some of my clients before, when I used to just do consultations with my clients in like the first half hour of the first session. But no, if I'm honest with you, kids, it's trial and error. Yeah. That graph that I draw nearly every time, that was something that just happened in one session where I was talking to a client and I was just trying to think, how can I articulate how significant this is? So I just drew that graph and it really resonated. And then I found myself doing it again and again. And now it's pretty staple, where you identify the patterns real quick. If someone basically, even sometimes people mention when they sit down, they're like, no, I don't drink, I don't get any takeaways, I don't do this, I don't know what the problem is. And you start thinking, okay, so I need a different detective lens to find what the issue is here. It's not going to be that. But yeah, 100% trial and error, and learning it on the job.
Dan, how long do you tend to allow for doing the consultation?
1 hour. 1 hour. And it's normally, now it's pretty good, but there's been times I've been there for 2 hours before, which is not good. That's a judgment call on my part. You know, sometimes I've been there and I was with a lady once for 2 hours, and it was almost after the gym was shut and we were just in there, and it turned into a bit more of a kind of therapy session, but it was very useful. I don't mind time. I don't mind doing that. It's just sometimes if something takes 2 hours, it might be an indication that it's got out of your control a little bit and you've probably got into the weeds in areas you shouldn't. Whereas with her, I kind of decided that was the right place. I've had some that are 40 minutes. Some people arrive, say they got half hour before their next phone call. So, you know, there's things like that. But yeah, the thing that takes the time is doing the follow-up notes, in truth. But that is something I've tried to get more concise at over time as well. And just one other thing I would say is like it does help massively to kind of feel confident in your ability to be like, all right, I know that a sandwich is about 500 calories. I know that restaurant food is this, and this. So you can eyeball it. And I know that if I'm talking to a 6-foot guy who's training a few times a week and otherwise is fairly sedentary, that their maintenance is probably going to be around 2,500 or something. You know, or if I'm talking to a petite female, I know that, you know, if they're active or whatever, the maintenance is around 2,000, they're going to want about 1,500. It's easy. It helps to know that, but you can know that just by doing it longer, because all I was finding was every time I work out a protein target for a woman, it seems to come somewhere around 95 to 100 grams. Like, and after doing that for 2 years, you then start saying, you know what, if you're a petite female, you probably need about 95 to 100 grams, because the chances are you're in this weight range. And if you're obese, you shouldn't be using 1.6 times grams per kilo body weight. You should probably be using 1.2, which will then put you back to about 95 to 100 grams. So you just find these things by doing it more and more. And then it's like, it's just easier to go straight to that recommendation and then backtrack and explain the science if you need to. I'm not sure if anyone asked that question, but anyway. All right, guys. Well, that's good. It's nice. I hope I didn't go through that too quickly. But that was
3 minutes remaining. You smashed it.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing was done very quickly. So cool. Fine. I'm happy. Hopefully that all makes sense. Like I say, guys, do just drop me a message in the app if you want to chat any more about it. I would implore people, if they want to do nutrition consults, just to do them. Rachel, I know you're already doing them essentially, aren't you? Before your first session anyway, which is great. And I'm always trying to encourage people at SIX3NINE to get involved in the process and start doing something they want to as well, because they are good fun and you certainly learn a lot. I remember, just an anecdote while we're here, Russ, I remember before I started doing these, Darren's an old colleague of ours at SIX3NINE. He used to say to me, oh, it's always just booze and eating out. And I was like, yeah. And I never necessarily agreed with him. I don't agree with him in person, but I just kind of thought, I don't know, people snack a lot or people do this. Because at that point, I'd only trained however many clients I'd ever had, which is maybe 30. Retention was relatively good to probably only train 30 people in my life. And it just so happened that those people, you know, that wasn't always the biggest problem. But then when you start doing these and seeing 5 new people every week, doing 100 new clients across a year, and then it's like, oh shit, literally 90% of these people, it is alcohol and restaurant food. Then it really gives you a load of experience just by seeing a volume of different people. So it's been super useful for that. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Darren had been able to see that many clients because of how old he was. That's like,
yeah. So I've got a fast track at least. So there we go.
Right.
All right.
Russ is up next week.
Yes. Look forward to it, mate.
Me too.
You've got about 2 seconds to sell it to me.
What are you talking about, Russ? Quick, you've got less than a minute. Go.
I think if I remember rightly, I said I was going to talk about strength a bit, didn't I?
He doesn't even remember. It'll be good regardless.
I've got so many lined up. I can't remember which one was next week now. No, I'm going to talk about strength programming. That's something I picked up a lot of information from my masters, and also training clients, and then having clients who are after that kind of thing being pinged towards me because of having studied it. So yeah, I'll go through some my sort of thoughts on strength programming, and yeah, we'll get into the weeds a bit with it as well, because I don't want to just go over the basics over and over again, because I get bored easily. So I'm going to go off piste quite quickly. It'll be good fun.
Okay, good summary. Hope everyone has a fab weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Hey guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.